What's up again, everybody? We are closing in on the end of ProQuest season, so as you go into your final ProQuest of this season, I want to give you a couple of options for fun decks you may not consider having played up till this point, but you may want to try and take to the ProQuest season just to have a little fun, try to finish strong. All of these are decks that actually either top 8'd or won a ProQuest this season, so that's pretty awesome. These are all decks by other players, and so huge shout out to all the players that put these together. And I will say this as well, all of these decks have a fantastic deck tech on one YouTube channel or the other, so I hope they don't mind me mentioning all those YouTube channels as we go by, because I highly recommend that you go watch the deck techs put together either by the players themselves or hosted by the content creator and then interviewing the player. So starting with Skyfish's Arachne Fatigue, this actually won a ProQuest. This took first place, and it is a primarily fatigue list, and a fantastic interview and deck tech overall was put on over at Alan Lube's channel, youtube.com/Alan Lube. Check it out. I think it is /Alan Lube. Either way, I'm going to try to put that in the description. Really, I'm going to try to put all of them in the description. But this list is a lot of fun, and I was very excited to see an Arachne pick up the win. This is a fatigue style list, and you'll notice as they go through, you're looking at only a handful of actual like assassin attacks, and then you're just playing for fatigue with like last ditch efforts. A single copy of Pummel's kind of spicy and fun, but you're running Oasis, you're running Fate for Scenes, you are running like the normal kind of like ones you would expect, Surgical Extraction, but you're not running a ton of other ones. And then you've got some interesting stuff like, for example, Imperial Warhorn has been a card that has just been creeping up in lists. This card has just, if you're talking about fatigue or control, this card has just slowly but surely etched its way into the meta in a really real way, which is kind of cool, which I think is cool. And this card is seeing, a good chunk of play. But of course, you're seeing Remembrances, defense reactions, all like out the wazoo, and you're basically just playing this in a fatigue style with all of your defense reactions, finding your times to maybe drop these big attacks to push either some damage or more likely some disruption and some fatigue off of the contract banishes. But overall, this is a very fatigue-oriented list, and it is something that Arachne can certainly play to, and actually picked up a win in a ProQuest. So shout out to Skyfish and overall the interview that was done and the deck tech that was done. So again, I want to link you down in the comments below. Go check those out. It's fantastic. Speaking of another ProQuest winning deck list, this is a Dorothea. I know it says me, but I had to build this from the video, and this was put out by Round Table of Wraith. By the way, Round Table of Wraith have some of the best long-form deck tech content out there, period, end of story. So I highly recommend you go check them out. And this ProQuest winning Dorothea list caught my eye. In fact, I was actually, weirdly enough, I was looking for a Dorothea list to feature in this video because I feel like Dorothea is one of those decks you should just play, you should just know, and just have a good time with. And I struggled to find a full-on list, and this is the one I wanted to feature, so I built the list from the video. And if I messed anything up, please forgive me, but go check out the full description, because again, it is a nice long-form like deck tech breakdown of how you play the matchup. But this is, by all intents and purposes, a pretty standard, straightforward Dorothea list. It does run 3 Command and Conquers, which has been pretty staple for a good while. We're including new cards like Puncture, which allow for piercing, which is a fantastic new addition to just Dorothea in general and warriors in general. Piercing, a really good keyword and an evergreen keyword that can really pop up in a lot of different like classes and heroes going forward, in my opinion. But you've got your standard power cards and Steelblade Supremacy, Singing Steelblade to go and fetch. We're only running 1 copy of Ironsong Determination, which kind of teeters back and forth. We do have, I think, a full play set of routes. We've got 1 in the sideboard, and I believe we run 2, or we might just run the 1. Yeah, no, we have two routes instead of the 3. But Spoils of War, a huge card, and then Glistening Steelblade. This card is just nuts. This card's really just nuts. Combine this with like a twinning on a same turn, and really you're just off to the races. this deck has a lot of legs in this format, and it's one of those that you need to know what you're playing up against, because it can do a lot of things. And honestly, like, even Epot in this deck is terrifying. This deck is really, really cool, and earned the top finish, I believe, at a ProQuest. And if you haven't played Dorothea, I highly recommend that you try playing Dorothea, because once you understand what Dorothea is doing and how Dorothea goes about her business, it can be very, very fun, and also it can really prey on people that don't know what Dorothea is doing. I've said that since the beginning, and that is incredibly true in my mind. Also, Ironsong Pride. This card is insanely good. This card's really, really good, and it kind of pushes Dorothea over the top, in my opinion, to being one of those, I would say maybe like, A-tier heroes that can just really take it to almost any hero in the meta, which is pretty good going into ProQuest week number 3. You may just want to dust off Dorothea and give her a try, figure out her play lines, and run with it. Now look, I could not make a video and not feature Irisdromide. This is Howling Mind's Irisdromide list. He took top 8 with this, and this is exactly what it sounds like. It's Prism, as close to Prism as you can be right now, but also with like Fyendal's Fighting Spirit, Enlightened Strike, the classics. But this is essentially you're playing out these big attacks. You have the capability of playing these big attacks, but you can always fall back on this full suite right here of auras that just sit out on the board. All the blue auras that Prism got access to right at the end of her sort of life cycle before Living Legend. You just rely on these, and Spectra is still very hard, very difficult to deal with for certain heroes, and you can just come across with a ton of damage. And just don't forget, burn them all as an aura, and it can stay out on the field, and it can also come across. So if you can start sticking like this board state that your opponent can't deal with, Iris of the Reality turns all of these like illusionist auras into 4 attack, 3 pitch weapons, basically. So you take a handful of blues, of which this deck has a lot of blues. As you can see, the base for blue is huge, 33, right? 33 blues in the main board. I think just straight up in the main board, counting main board. Yeah, I could be wrong. This might actually count everything. I can't recall. But a large contingent of blues. And once you've established a board, you stop directly defending, and you start advantageously keeping, 2 blues or 3 blues and swinging just 4, 8, 12, 4, 8, 12. It's nutty. It's nuts, and it's super cool. And it's a great new fresh take on Dromide that Howling Mind's put together, and you should try it out. You should test it out and see for yourself. I know I am going to be messing around with it. I also love the inclusion of Phantasmaclasm. Basically, any deck that lets me play Phantasmaclasm, I'm always interested in, because I like Phantasmaclasm. That's a cool card, and it's fun to say. Also, this was a card, Prismatic Shield was a card that I absolutely messed around with a ton when it first came out in Monarch, when the Illusionist class came out, because I loved making just shields. I loved making spectral shields. And so to see it back in a deck is really exciting. So take this one for a spin in your upcoming ProQuest. And I'll tell you right now, if your opponents don't know what Irisdromide is, you are going to have just a contingent of people around you trying to figure out what's going on. If they're all newer players, this is going to be like a mind-blowing moment for a lot of them. Oh, and before I go, this was actually featured in a full deck tech on Arsenal Pass. So check out Arsenal Pass's deck tech, breaking it down alongside of the deck's creator, Howling Minds, because he did a really good job of breaking it down, and Brendan walked alongside of him the entire way through. So check that out. And finally, I can't end this video without talking about Levi over at Roundtable of Wraiths Azalea deck, because it's Azalea, man. People love Azalea. So look, if you've never played Azalea, maybe this is the time. Maybe it's the time to play Azalea. This is the last opportunity this ProQuest season, and you can just jam it on out there. So this list is finely tuned, and it's got, just great cards. Like Drill Shot nowadays, this card is really, really good. Just straight up, when it hits a hero, you get to -1 in equipment they control. This is in Like, at first glance, you're like, okay, cool. But the more you think about this, the more utility this gets. It's just a permanent -1 counter. And there's no hero, like Guardians, for example. They can take that -1 counter off, but no one's running the cards to do so. So this is straight up just like permanent damage value, if you will. Drill Shot, a super good card nowadays. And it's running some of my favorite cards like Ravenous Rabble. Red in the Ledger, always an absolute MVP. Can actually just end games, end turns, make your opponent just life miserable. And then a very large, I would call it a transformative sideboard, but the game plan's always kind of there. But again, this is Roundtable of Wraith, and Levi is incredibly well known. We actually got to watch Levi play this deck in the top 8 of the Min-Max ProQuest. So I do have that video here on the channel if you do want to go watch that. It's a very long, arduous stream, and it was fantastic. It was one of my favorite streams that I've ever been a part of, and highly recommend you go watch the entire stream. But Levi's games were awesome, and he plays it with such precision that you really know he's got this thing down to a T. And I would be surprised if he's not the first person to get Living Legend points for Azalea. And it could happen this weekend. I'm crossing my fingers if he's playing that he picks up some Living Legend points, because that would be sick. So there you go. There are 4 decks that you could take to your final ProQuest of the season. Tell me in a comment below, which of these 4 decks would you be most excited to take to a ProQuest and actually try out and try to pick up some wins with? These are all tested, tried and true decks, pro decks, if you will. So let me know which one you like the best in a comment below. And thank you to all of the content creators that did great interviews and deck techs on these decks, because they are fantastic and I enjoyed watching all of them. And yes, I did actually watch all of them, and I wanted to share them with you. And I thought, I could do a breakdown on each one, but I'd rather you go watch those ones because they're really, really good. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to make the number go slightly higher to the other number. And as always, thanks for watching.